The cold wind sliced through my coat as I stood by my father's grave, but I hardly noticed it. No matter what the cold threw at me, the weight of grief was greater. My father, the guy who had been my rock and who had loved me unconditionally, was no longer with me. As I watched the casket descend into the ground, the priest's voice continued to drone on, a meaningless hum in the background. This was the last farewell. Alex, my older brother, stood stiffly next to me, his fists clenched. But he wasn't in grief like I was. I knew him too well, but his face was expressionless. The stiffness in his posture and the tension in his jaw were signs of anticipation rather than sadness. He waited. Alex then seized my wrist, his hold nearly hurting, just as the funeral was coming to a conclusion, before the visitors had even had a chance to depart. "Let's talk, Emily," he remarked in a stern yet hushed voice. I let out a sigh. I was aware of the direction this was taking. I said, looking around at our distraught family members. "Not here, Alex." Alex didn't care, though. He didn't. He insisted, "Give me my half of the inheritance." With my stomach in knots, I turned to face him fully. Our boyhood home, his savings, and most of his assets, including the $5 million she had spent a lifetime building, were all bequeathed to me by my father. He knew Alex, not because he was partial. He was aware that, like he had done with his own funds, my brother would spend it all in a few months. Similar to how he had left us a tiny inheritance years ago after Mom passed away. Even though my heart was racing in my ears, I said, "I don't think this is the time," in a firm voice. Alex shook his head and scoffed. "Stop being so rude, Emily. We're family. Even though I know Dad left you everything, the money remains motionless. I'm worthy of my part." I inhaled deeply while attempting to maintain my composure. "Alex, Dad made his choice. It wasn't created by me." His lips curled into a sneer as his eyes grew dark. "You believe you are deserving of everything? Haven't you always been Dad's little favorite?" I took a deep breath. Despite how very hurtful the charge was, I kept it to myself. I stated calmly, "This isn't about favorites. It has to do with accountability." Dad was aware. Alex laughed sourly and without amusement. "What did Dad know? That I was more in need of it than you were? That while I struggle, you would hoard it?" I balled my fists up. "Alex, you don't struggle. You're a waste. You've squandered all your time." It was that. His hands clenched into fists as his cheeks flushed. Before rushing off, he spat, "You'll regret this." With my chest constricted, I watched him leave. The last words spoken by my father replayed in my mind. "Emily, don't entrust him with your money. He'll use it to ruin himself." Before I could even have time to grieve, greed showed up. After 2 weeks, I let myself breathe again for the first time in weeks. After the funeral, I had fulfilled my father's request to take care of his business, keep the house intact, and try to go on. I arranged a little vacation to Spain, a much-needed reprieve. I need a place to handle things and simply live without the burden of legal disputes and loss weighing heavily on me. The initial days were quiet. I sipped wine by the beach, strolled through Barcelona's streets, and allowed myself to grieve unhindered. Then my phone buzzed on the 4th day. I looked at it, anticipating a straightforward alert. A friend's message, perhaps. But my stomach fell as I saw Alex's name. With a knot of dread in my stomach, I hesitated before opening the text. I read it after that. "I have brought all of our parents' possessions home with me. I now own it. The locks have already been replaced." I blinked. Read it twice. Then, in the middle of a quiet cafe, I burst out laughing before I could stop myself. Because my beloved brother had just made the most foolish error of his life, which he was unaware of and had foolishly ignored. I was also going to give him a lesson he would never forget. Alex was a fool. I just sat there looking at my phone for a while, allowing the ridiculousness of it all to sink in. Did he really believe that he could simply walk into my father's house, take it as his own, and be done with it? Did he believe that removing the locks would nullify legal possession in some way? I sipped my wine slowly, let out a sigh, and put my glass down while my fingers clenched around my phone, and I began texting a reply. "Alex, that's adorable. Tell me about your experience with that." I hit the submit button and reclined in my chair, experiencing a surprising sensation: laughter. Not rage, not even annoyance. Because the truth was that Alex had just committed the greatest error of his life. And he didn't know. I requested the check, flagged down my waiter, and made reservations for the first flight home. Exhaustion was like a second skin by the time I returned to the city. It didn't matter, though. I was laser focused on a single objective. My initial action was to give my lawyer a call. Mr. Holloway replied, Emily in a kind but formal tone. I take it that you're phoning regarding your brother? With a groan, I put my luggage down beside the door. You make the right assumption. I assumed, he remarked. A few days ago, the house's security system alerted us, entering without authorization. Naturally, because he was such a thorough man, my father got everything set up safely and lawfully. He had an unwavering will. My name was still attached to the house. My legal team continued to keep an eye on the security system. Alex believed that I had given him something. Actually, he had just broken into someone else's house. I paced my flat and stated, I want to handle this smartly. I don't want a protracted court case. I want this to end quickly. Holloway mumbled something. You can either press charges for theft and trespassing, or give him an opportunity to leave on his own volition before we escalate. I was aware that Alex would not voluntarily depart. However, I was also aware that giving him the appearance of control would only make his demise more delightful. With a slow grin developing, I added, Let's give him a little rope and observe how much he uses to hang himself. I took a car up to my father's house that evening, the home I was legally the owner of. I made no attempt to knock. I tried the door handle instead. Locked. As anticipated, the doorbell rang. Nothing. I gave it another ring. Nothing has changed. I grinned. Alex. Oh. In reality, he was acting as though he weren't at home. I took out my cell phone and called him. Inside the house, the phone rang. Through the door, I could hear his annoying ringtone. I waited. At last, he responded, Emily, what do you want? I rested my weight on the doorframe. Well, I want my house back first. Alex snorted. Your residence? You're referring to our home, I chuckled. I'm not sure how to break it to you, Alex, but the house you're now occupying is legally mine. You are intruding. He gave a snort. Yes, exactly. Dad wouldn't treat me that way. I shot back. Dad didn't screw you over. You subjected yourself to that. You spent every penny your mother left you. Every bridge was burnt by you. He no longer trusted you. You're playing house in someone else's house now. Alex's tone became piercing. You're not worthy of it. That isn't your decision, I stated calmly. Now, before I involve the law in this, I'm giving you one chance to leave. Quiet. Then a slow, derisive laugh. Yes? And, little sister, what precisely are you going to do? Make a police call? You wouldn't, I grinned to myself. Want to place a wager? I got up early the following morning and called a few people. I was parked outside the home once more by midday. However, I wasn't by myself this time. Beside me, a locksmith vehicle drew up. You're Emily Carter? The man inquired. I am that. He checked his papers and nodded. This is your evidence of ownership. Okay, let's get started. As I stood watching the front door with my arms crossed, the locksmith and his helper worked quickly and expertly on the locks. The moment I had been anticipating finally came 10 minutes later. It threw open the door. Anger blazed in Alex's eyes as he stood there. What in the world are you doing? I grinned. Changing the locks. You know, since you altered them without authorization. His face flushed. You can't just... Oh, I said, but I can. Alex, this house is mine. You don't. I offered you the opportunity to go alone, but you chose not to. Okay. So now, you are not given an option. I looked at the locksmith. Call the police if he tries to meddle. Anger instantly covered the tiny widening of Alex's eyes. It's not over, he snarled. I cocked my head. Oh, Alex, it's over. However, if you persist, I'll see to it that things go worse for you. After completing his work, the locksmith nodded and gave me my new keys. Going well, Miss Carter. Alex raged as he stood there and then bounded off to his car. I watched and waited until he drove off. I then entered, shut the door, and secured it after leaving. My home, my guidelines. Alex was done playing. It was my time now. That evening, I gazed at the luminous security camera footage on my phone while seated in my father's favorite armchair. Once more, the house was mine. However, I was aware that Alex would not tolerate this. He had always been obstinate, too conceited to acknowledge defeat. This time, though, it went beyond simple stubbornness. It was desperate. And I understood why. My father had left a very detailed will. I got the estate, the savings, and the house. Not because Alex was superior to me. However, I was the only one who refused to burn it all down. That's what Alex had already done to himself. I felt in charge for the first time in weeks. Legally and physically, I had the house back. I ought to have felt secure. It should have made me feel better. But I knew Alex in my heart. I also knew he wasn't finished. I watched the security camera feeds while sitting in my father's armchair and gazing at my phone. The night was closing in on me, and the house was silent. However, I couldn't get rid of the sensation like a storm building over the horizon. Alex did more than simply lose. He didn't accept defeat. When did he get desperate? He was indifferent to the repercussions. There wasn't much waiting for me. My phone chimed at 3:12 a.m. THREE nights later. Front entrance, motion detected. I opened the app with a knotted tummy. He was there. Alex. Wearing black clothing, he carried a duffel bag on his shoulder. What, though, turned my stomach? He wasn't by himself. Beside him, another man was whispering something into his ear. Someone I had never seen before. This visit wasn't merely an intoxicated one. It was a burglary. Before my thoughts caught up, my hands were already in motion. With trembling fingers, I clutched my phone and quickly dialed 911. 911, tell me about your emergency. I forced my voice to remain steady as I muttered, my brother is trying to break into my house. He's not alone himself. I have cameras for security. They are currently at my front door. The dispatcher spoke in a cool, collected tone. Are you inside? Indeed. The doors are secured. Remain on the line. Officers are en route. My pulse pounded in my ears as I let out a breath and tightened my hold on the phone. I saw Alex pause via the cameras, looking up at the security system as if he had just realized it was there. He was nudged by the other person who said something I couldn't hear. Then, he reached into his backpack and took something out. A crowbar. Christ Jesus. I felt chilled. I pushed the phone up against my ear. They've got a crowbar. They are attempting to enter. The dispatcher's tone grew piercing. Continue to be where you are. In a few minutes, officers will arrive. That was what I wanted to think. However, when your own brother was waiting outside, threatening to smash down the door, the minutes seemed to drag on forever. The crowbar was raised by Alex. The man beside him grabbed the handle. Then the night was broken by the flashing of blue and red lights. In front of the house, a patrol car screeched to a stop. Hands where they're visible. My chest hurt from the force of my exhale. I watched the scene through the camera feed. Like a rat in a trap, the second man took off into the night. However, Alex? He remained still, frozen. With their weapons out, 2 officers charged at him. Get down on the ground! I briefly believed he had fled. He seemed to be assessing his odds as his entire body tightened. He wasn't quick enough, though. He was seized by 2 officers, who then smashed him against the police car's hood and fastened his handcuffs. He cursed, and I heard it. Heard him strain. Then I witnessed something that nearly made me chuckle through the security feed. In his life, for the first time, Alex appeared frightened. They were dragging him to the squad car when I opened the front door. His gaze locked with mine. Fury, fear, betrayal. You reported me to the police? In a harsh voice, he yelled. I folded my arms. Alex, you broke into my house. What were you anticipating? Do you want to press charges, ma'am? One of the cops asked, turning to face me. Alex's arrogance broke. I could see it in the way his hands trembled a little in the cuffs, and his mouth tightened. I wouldn't do it, he thought. He assumed I would overlook this. He was mistaken. I looked him in the eyes and answered, Yes, I am. The color faded from his face. After giving him a nod, the officer pushed him into the rear of the squad car and slammed the door. And, like that, at last, Alex had lost. I didn't get any sleep that evening. I just sat at the kitchen table and stared at my unfinished coffee, mentally reliving everything. Alex was incarcerated for entering our father's home without permission, for attempting to take something that was never truly his. I should have been relieved, perhaps even contentment. This was, after all, the inevitable result of his decisions, wasn't it? But rather, I was so exhausted. Because regardless of how careless, self-centered, and damaging Alex had been, regardless of my desire to despise him, I couldn't get rid of one truth. He was my sibling. Furthermore, I had no idea how to keep him from hurting himself. My telephone rang later that afternoon. Unknown inmate call number. I gazed at the display. I took a deep breath before responding. Emily. He spoke in a gruff tone. Bitter. Are you content now? Leaning against the counter, I tightened my hold on the phone. Alex, I sighed. My house was broken into by you. Our house, he informed me abruptly. I forced calmness into my voice and closed my eyes. Dad's home, that he bequeathed to me. You were aware of a will. Quiet. Then a laugh that was humorless and dry. Yes, I was aware. I knew my father had betrayed me. I knew he had abandoned you, as if I didn't exist. I gripped the phone tighter. Alex, he didn't let you down. You were shielded from yourself by him. Quiet. Then he scoffed at last. Whoa. You see me that way then? As a lost cause? Some junkie who is unreliable? I paused, because, well, I saw him that way. But uttering it aloud? It was inhumane. Rather, I said, Alex, you took from Dad. You told him a falsehood, exploited him, and you ignored him when he attempted to assist you. What should he have done? More quiet. His breathing was heavy and irregular, and I could hear it, as if he were trying to suppress something. He spoke in a hushed tone. All I wanted was something that belonged to me, and that? I wasn't prepared for how hard that affected me, because behind all the haughtiness, the anger, the careless choices, only a lost boy was present. A boy who had never really bounced back from our mother's death. A boy who lost all sense of direction and was unable to see a route back. I took a swallow. Alex, you need help. One more sour chuckle. Your charity is not necessary for me. It's not charity, I firmly stated. I'm your sister, and I'm telling you that I don't want you to ruin yourself. He didn't answer. However, he also didn't end the call. And in some way, the tiniest stride forward seemed to be that. Alex was a fighter at heart. Not in the sense of being strong or honorable, but rather in the sense of never letting go of a grudge or backing down, even when he was in error. Particularly when he was in error. I could tell that a portion of him was listening when he didn't end the call and remained on the line despite everything. That implied that there was still a possibility. I had another meeting with Mr. Holloway the next day. Are you thinking of dismissing the charges? As he rummaged through some documents, he raised an eyebrow and questioned. One hand swept through my hair. I'm not sure. Holloway leaned back in his chair and sighed. I am aware that he is your brother, Emily. You must eventually ask yourself, though, if he is willing to change. I shook my head and let out a breath. I'm not sure, I said. However, I am aware that he will die if he does not receive assistance quickly. After examining me for a while, Holloway put his papers down. There is an alternative. I raised my head. What? Rehab? I scowled. Rehab? You could work out an agreement, Holloway said. Drop the charges as long as he finishes a rehabilitation course. It gives him a genuine chance to change his life and compels him to accept responsibility for his deeds. My thoughts were racing as I sat back. Would Alex even think of that? Would he interpret it as an opportunity or as simply another tactic I was using to manipulate him? However, I was also aware of the alternative. If nothing changes and I let him leave jail, he would be exactly where he began. And he might not simply be arrested the next time. He may not make it. At least I had to try. I went to see him that night. It was a little holding cell, sterile. Alex had his hands shackled in front of him as he sat on a bench. He appeared fatigued for the first time. Not in his bones, but in his body as well. His eyes were sunken, and his face looked pallid. I took a seat across from him, but he remained silent. I let out a sigh. Alex, I'm not here to argue with you. His laughter was dry. That's a first. I disregarded that. I'm here to offer you an option. He squinted his eyes. What sort of decision? A piece of paper was slipped across the table by me. He gave it a quick look. What is this? A bargain, I said. I have the authority to file charges. Your future should be decided by the court. Or, I inhaled deeply, you enter a rehabilitation center. His entire body tensed. He shook his head instantly and answered, No, I'm not going to do that. Then you'll remain incarcerated, I stated firmly. He tightened his jaw. I don't require treatment. I bent over. So, Alex, what do you need? One more arrest? Another cell night? Another slip up? He balled his hands into fists. My family needs to stop acting as though I'm broken. I took a deep breath. I whispered, We only treat you that way because you are. He winced for the first time. Turned away. I took a leaflet out of my backpack and slid it in his direction. I said, Read it. Consider it. This is your opportunity, Alex, yet no one is pressuring you. Your only opportunity. He did not stop staring at it. Then he took it up without saying anything. There was no sound for 3 days. He had to decide whether to go to rehab and attempt to start over, or remain in jail and deal with the repercussions. I had no idea which way Alex would go because I knew him. A part of me thought he would discard the booklet as soon as I walked out, to simply be stubborn and turn down the offer. Alex had never been the type to own up to his mistakes. However, a part of me hoped that perhaps, just possibly, things would be different this time. My phone rang on the 4th day. Unknown caller. I was hesitant to respond. Hey? A long pause ensued. Finally, I heard a voice that was different from mine. I'll carry it out. I was silent for a moment. I wasn't sure if I had heard him correctly. What are you going to do? I asked thoughtfully. Breathe slowly. Rehab. I felt as though an unseen burden that I had been bearing had been lifted. That's great, Alex, I muttered. That is excellent, he whispered. Don't make a big deal out of it. However, his voice lacked bite. Just fatigue. I refrained from pushing. I knew him well enough to know that he would shut down entirely if I made this moment too emotional. So I just said, I'll make the arrangements instead. I had another meeting with Holloway later that day. Are you certain about this? As he rummaged through documents, he asked. You won't be able to file charges against him again if he leaves the rehab facility. This offer is only valid once. I understand. Holloway looked at me for a long time and then let out a sigh. All right. I'll submit the required documentation. He must finish the program in order for the charges to be withdrawn. And like that, the route was established. A route out has been provided for Alex. It was his turn to accept it now. I took him to the rehab center myself a week later. He remained silent for the most part, gazing out the window. He drummed his knee with his fingers. Even though he would never acknowledge it, I could tell he was anxious. As we arrived, he whispered, This place is fancy. The expansive complex was encircled by peaceful walking pathways and open fields. It appeared to be more of a wellness retreat than a rehabilitation facility. It's among the best, I informed him. Their areas of expertise are financial rehabilitation and addiction treatment. They will assist you in devising a strategy for your departure, Alex snorted. A strategy. Correct. After parking, I turned to look at him. This is your chance, Alex. I need you to be serious about it. He didn't respond, simply gazed at the doorway as if it were a prison gate. He sighed at last. Emily, without all the chaos, I don't know who I am. I was surprised by what he said. I took a swallow. Maybe it's time to figure that out, he said gently. He looked at me for the first time in years. Not with rage, not with bitterness. However, with a hint of remorse. Then he opened the car door and got out without saying another word. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched him ascend the stairs. Would he remain? Would he flee? Would he really give it a shot? I had no idea. However, for the first time in a long time, at least now, he made the choice. It was 3 months later. I didn't go. I knew Alex, so it wasn't that I didn't care. He would feel confined if I hovered or checked in too frequently. Like he always did, he would find a way to blame me for his decisions. So I left him alone. That didn't stop me from thinking about him, though. I wondered every day if he was really trying. Was he battling his own demons, Or was he daydreaming about leaving and crashing again? Then my phone buzzed one evening. Alex, hello? Can we have a conversation? I spent a lot of time looking at the message. I typed back slowly after that. Me, obviously. When you're ready, give me a call. It was 2 hours later. No phone call. I wasn't shocked. Years of poor decisions were not reversed by 3 months in treatment. The hurt, the betrayals, and the destruction he had caused to his life were not gone. However, it was a beginning. I never imagined he would take that start, and that had some significance. At last, my phone rang. Alex. I inhaled deeply before responding. Hi. There was stillness on the other end for a moment. A slow exhale follows. Hi. I waited. Let him talk first. I was wise enough not to push. At last, he declared, I'm out. He spoke in a different tone, less noisy, less jagged at the edges. The program was completed yesterday. I reclined in my seat. How are you feeling? He laughed briefly and without humor, as if I had just left a fucking monastery. I gave a small smile but didn't return the joke. Was it beneficial? One more pause. Then, more subtly, yes. I believe it did. I felt a sense of relief. He cleared his throat and said, I wanted to express my gratitude for continuing to believe in me. The lump in my throat was swallowed. Alex, I was very close. I understand, he said in a gruff but sincere tone. I don't blame you either. There was silence between us. Then he said, almost reluctantly, I'm trying. I'm not sure whether I'll ever be normal. However, I wish to perform better. I, for the first time in years, thought he was real. We met in a little cafe outside the city a few days later. Alex's appearance changed. His hands were steadier, his face was less sunken, and he had regained some of his weight. More than that, though something else existed, there was something in his eyes. Clarity. After rearranging his coffee in his cup, he looked up at me. Now what? I inhaled deeply. That is up to you. As if he knew that already, he nodded. I need a job. It was accurate. At that point, I made the decision I had been considering ever since he called. I answered, I'll give you one. Alex blinked. What? I bent over. Dad's home. I own it. However, I don't want to stay there forever. It's too large for only me. However, it requires effort. I stopped. I'll hire you to assist me in fixing it if you're sincere about attempting to change. Give you a fair wage. Provide a place for you to stay while you recover. His mouth tightened. You have faith in me for that? I looked him in the eye. Not entirely, I acknowledged. However, I have faith in your desire to improve. I inhaled deeply. Additionally, I believe that Dad would have preferred that you be given the opportunity to earn something. Refuse to accept it, not insist on it. Get it. Alex sat there looking at me for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. All right, there was no apology, there was no guarantee. However, it was a beginning. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think that perhaps we could reunite as a family. Months went by. What about Alex? He fulfilled his promise. Together, we painted walls, repaired broken tiles, and erased memories. We didn't talk much at first. We simply worked quietly, absorbed in our own ideas. However, as time passed, we spoke more. Regarding Dad, concerning Mom, regarding the things we still had and the ones we lost. Alex spoke softly one evening while we were sitting on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. He said, I miss them. I regret wasting so much time in my anger. I turned to face him. Then don't waste any more, he said as quietly. He gave a nod. However, I knew it wasn't that easy. It took time to heal. Forgiveness was difficult. However, we were making an effort, and that was sufficient for now.